Is traditional music theory the best way to learn how to make music? Because I've asked this question when I was in college learning from a songwriter, Michael Hollinger, shout out to him. Basically, we learned the 1-3-5 to make our first chord. Okay, I'm gonna close my eyes, I'm gonna pick a random note. Now, how do I know what is the 1, the 3, and the 5? As a beginner, you might count up your keyboard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not the major chord. Okay, so the first starting point in my argument today as to why I think traditional music theory needs to be questioned is because starting on the 1 is a fundamentally flawed system. And here's why. It's because if you're using a relative system, starting on a 1 doesn't make sense even in physics, because if you don't move in physics, there's no measurement to make. So starting on 1 is the fundamental flaw in my opinion. So let me show you guys something. Here's some magic. If you want to gather your family and friends, let me show you guys something. I'm going to close my eyes, pick a random note, and you don't even need to know the note's name or anything. All you have to do is count up your keyboard using what I call chord codes. You can get a free chord code chart at busyworksbeats.com/music theory. I'll leave the link below and you can download it straight to your phone. So let's say we want to make the minor 9th chord a really jazz-like chord. Let's say you want to impress your guests at your party. So it's wherever you land is 0. And all you got to do is count up your keyboard note by note. 1, 2, 3. And now we're going to continue the chord code at 0, 3, 7, 10, 14. I give you all the chord codes so you don't have to memorize them. But basically it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You now have a minor 9th chord without any scale, without knowing what key you're in. And that's important because in music, when you're taught to start with a scale, you think you have to stay in the scale. But what if you want to do something like this? Okay, that's going out of scale on purpose. What if we did something like the Bruno Mars video we did recently where it's like, and then here we're going to go out of scale. Okay, because that creates the tension to come back to the beginning. Okay, so going out of scale is part of the R&B sound, the soul sound, the vibey sound. So like when we're taught to stay in scale all the time and have the scale center perspective, that's one of the hindrances as to why you guys can't advance. So let me show you guys something. So here's somebody left a comment on my Instagram. They're like, this is the wrong way to teach music. How dare you teach chord codes? So you start at the 1, 3, and the 5. And I said, what is the 1, the 3, and the 5? If you can't count on your keyboard, then you have to now introduce a whole new word to somebody, AKA a scale. Now you have to define a scale. Which scale are we in? Are we in the C major? Are we in the harmonic minor, the natural minor, the C Phrygian? Are we in the C Lydian? There's so many scales it could be. So saying the 1, 3, 5 does not translate all the time for beginners. Okay, so that's my fundamental flaw in this kind of mindset, is because Western music, and we all know, what did Kendrick say, colonizers? Okay, Western music is centered around their way of thinking. Okay, we have to use the major scale, which is all the white notes. Because all the scales, if we wanted to change this to a minor scale, we would say, okay, we're going to use the flat 3. Now that's it. So you get the idea. It's like we're flattening notes or we're sharpening notes instead of just saying something else to identify. We're always using it in relation to the major scale. But why the major scale? Who decided the major scale was the winner of all scales? And that's the fundamental kind of like core root training that you guys don't think, but it affects you because it's such a subconscious meta layer. You don't realize how important it is when you're learning music. So the way I learned was unorthodox because I was struggling. I came from college. I had one songwriting course. I always loved music, but I never studied it traditionally. And I thought you had to be in band to learn music, but that was not true. So in college, I took a songwriting course. They taught me music theory. Michael Hollinger, shout out to him. But part of that program, I was looking at the staff and the musical notes and the sheet music, and I was like trying to understand it, but I was thinking in half steps because everything on there reminded me of FL Studio. So it just confused the crap out of me, for one, with the sheet music, the way that's programmed, but also two, the 1, the 3, and the 5 language. Okay, so one of the things here, when you sound design, you can insert intervals. So let me show you guys something. Let's clear this out. So when I was sound designing, you kind of start with the root note. Okay, so I would do, okay, note 1, and then I did note 3, because I'm thinking, okay, I want to make a chord. Let's change the note value. So 1, 3, and then I go to part B, and then I'll enter 5. So I was like, that doesn't sound like a major chord. It sounds dissonant. Something sounds off. It's not a major chord. Now, if I go inside this plugin and I put 0 Okay, 047, which is the actual chord code for a major chord. Now when I play one note, it is a major chord. And that taught me that, oh, I was learning music theory in scale degrees, but not necessarily the actual semitone values. And that's the major 7 chord, 04711. So we can get deep with it, but that's what opened my eyes. I was like, oh, I've been learning scale degrees this entire time and trying to apply it to a semitone based DAW. And that's why I was having a lot of issues learning music production, is because in FL Studio in Ableton, we see a piano roll, we're counting notes, and it doesn't have a scale mapped out for us by default. So that's my first kind of flaw that I see in the system of traditional music theory. I have notes here, so I'll stay on track. So we talked about the scale centric versus chord codes. Again, is it faster and easier to say 047? I start anywhere on my keyboard, 0, count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whoops. That's the major chord there. Or should I say, okay, this note is the 1, and now I have to play the 3 and the 5. What is the 3 and the 5? Now I have to learn the whole step, half step. So it's whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Now I got to count, okay, what's the 3? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That took like 7 more steps to do than just playing 047 on the keyboard. That's why my chord code approach is very powerful, because even when you get deeper into music theory, sometimes you want to add a chord that isn't in the key. You don't know which parallel mode it's from. You don't know where you're taking it from. You're just using the voicing. So let's say I have a chord like this and I want to land. Let's say I want to go here, but I want it to be a different chord. So I'm like, okay, which chord do I use? Okay, so let's work backwards now. So this is for the advanced folks. I can use chord codes going backwards. So let's say I want to make the same vibe, a minor ninth chord. The top note is 14, so it's 0, 3, 7, 10, 14. So I'm going to count backwards now. So this note becomes now my new 14. Now I'm going to count backwards, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So now this is the, what is this, F minor chord for those wondering. So now I go, okay, the next chord is F minor. So now I go. So now I know the next chord to move to. I'm using my brain to translate and know which chord it could potentially be. Now there's different chord types. I know I'm kind of being fast here on this podcast, but it could be major, it could be minor. There's different chord types, and I teach all this at busyworksbeats.com/music theory essentials. But it shows that chord codes are great for beginners because it shows you how to literally look at a keyboard and play a chord instantly. But it also shows how advanced players can actually use it to fill in the gaps of their chord progressions, know which chord is next, and use playing by ear to help you solve that chord. So it's very powerful. Chord codes, when I discovered chord codes, I was like, this is insanely powerful. And I found that out, 8, 9 years ago, and I've been teaching it ever since because it's that powerful. Okay, so that's the scale-centric approach versus chord codes. Next, I talked about the Western scales. And again, it's just a mindset thing where it's like, okay, why is everything centered around C major? Like if I go out of C major, or a major scale, I'll say, why is it that everything's the flat 3, the flat 5, deriving from the major scale? Because if you didn't know, you have relative scales. So this is a major scale. We can play the same exact notes, just starting from a different point, but we get a different vibe, but we're using the same exact notes. So it's about perception of where do we start in the phase of notes, okay, to create different moods. And that's where modes came from. But it all derives from this C major perspective. What if we start at G? Okay, so it's C Ionian, which is a mode. And a mode, an easier way to think about a mode is it's a scale. It's an old version of a scale. So we have C major, we have D Dorian, E Phrygian, great for trap and like Travis Scott stuff. Then you have F Lydian, and G Mixolydian. I always remember that because Mixolydian comes after Lydian. Then you have Aeolian, which funny enough starts at A. And then we have B Locrian. Okay, so those all create different moods, but they're starting at different points. So if I'm always referring to the major scale as the center point, but I get all these different moods, it can confuse people as to where to start. You guys ask me all the time, what's the best chord progression to use? Even if I said the 2-5-1, you're like, okay, the 2-5-1 of what? The minor scale, the major scale. Even if I wrote it in Roman numerals, you would be like, okay, am I starting in this mode and pulling from this? It's so much confusion because it doesn't cohesively patch the language from beginning to scale degrees to end. And that's the issue that I have with traditional music theory. It just doesn't do a good job of translating. Here's another kind of myth, and this is just added stuff. So you were told that C major means happy and minor means sad. There are uses for that. So let's say the first use is you want to find the relative scale. So if I start at C major, okay, C would be my root note in this case, and we will consider major happy only for this one explanation that gives this a purpose. Okay, that's C major. Now, what if I want to find the relative minor scale of my C major scale? If I'm in a happy major scale, I'm going to count down to sadness. So I'm going to take my root note and count down to sadness. I know I'm exaggerating, but it teaches a point here. 1, 2, 3. Count down 3 notes. So it's C. Count down 3 notes into sadness. 1, 2, 3. Start from this point. Play the same exact notes in the scale. You get your relative scale. Now, if I'm in a minor scale, A natural minor, for example, and I want to find the relative major, I'm going to count up to happiness. That's the easy way I remember this. So now my root note is A. We're going to count up 3 notes, literally 1, 2, 3. Now you found your relative major scale. So that's the only use I've found for saying that major is happy and minor is sad. Because I'll show you guys, if you play what's called a voicing, a chord voicing, you can make chords sound way different. Here's a normal 2-5-1. Here's the 2, aka the scale. Now, here's another reason I just thought of why music theory traditionally is not taught in the best way to learn music. Because when I say 2, I don't mean 2. I mean the second scale degree. If I say 2, I might think it's the second semitone or just 2 notes away. 2 does not mean 2. And I think that lazy kind of language confuses a lot of people too. 2 means the second scale degree because it's a relative position in a scale. Second. If I'm the second person in line, I'm only the second person in line because the first person's in line. If I take out the first person, I'm the first person in line. So second is a relative position. It's not 2. If I take away the first person, there's not 2 people in that line anymore. It's only 1 person. So that's why that nomenclature is archaic and it confuses people. I know I'm picking at the nuances, but these little things add up to confusion in you guys' mind. So anyhow, we have D minor, we have G major, and then we have C major. So this is a traditional 2-5-1, but what we'll do is make it more gospel-y. I can make a simple triad sound soulful. Here's how you do it. You're basically going to invert the notes above a certain point. Okay, so we're going to invert the root note G up an octave. So it's called the first inversion. Now listen to this. It has a half step, so it sounds more gospel. Sounds way more soulful just from simply moving these notes around. And it took a major chord and made it sound very soulful. And it's chord voicing, not necessarily the chord type. You can learn a lot about chords, but it's not really about just the chord. You got to learn how to play the chord. Let me show you guys something real quick. Is if I play a major chord, or any chord really, let's play D minor, for example. Let's spread it out. So let's play D in the bass and then F major up top. So this is a specific chord voicing to where it thickens out the sound. We're playing D minor 9th or D minor 7th here. Okay, so if I played it normally, it'd sound like this, very thin. Here's the very filled out voicing. Now, what if we did cool stuff like raise? Now, in this case, I wouldn't raise the third of a 7th, but or a 9th. Let's raise the third of the 7th versus this. Here's the original. Here's the raised third. Gives you a whole different vibe. Now, hopefully, I can play this by memory. I used to be able to play this. All right, so let's do here. Might have to go down an octave. My squeaky floor. So if you have my floor squeak, it's this floor. Okay, so let's do AC. And this is what gives it a vibe. Normally I would play. That doesn't have the same vibe. Okay, so now I'm voicing it by raising that third. Let's go to F here. All right, so that is giving it a whole different vibe, an R&B vibe, just by raising that third up. So these are the things I'm talking about. It's like we're taught to focus on the wrong thing, basically. The next thing is we talked about relative keys and modes. Dang, I kind of subconsciously went through my whole list for today. We talked about notation versus sound. Now, here's the thing that I want to show you guys is the nuance here. So most of you are taught, pardon me, especially with modern melodies and beat makers, we're taught to focus on the notes. And I can tell you it's way more than the notes nowadays. You got to learn the sound effects. You got to learn the processing technique. Melody is not just the notes. I'll show you guys a couple things. We're not going to like harp on it. I'll just show you kind of basic concepts here. And to make this even faster, let's hit Alt-P in FL24. We're going to pull up the chord progression tool just to save time because we don't have a bunch of time here. All right, so let's make this a performance. Let's do an arpeggio. All right, so here's our starter sound, but we're going to switch this to a sine wave for those who are following along. So we have a sine wave. Now, I'm going to play the regular notes, and then I'm going to actually play, an FM-based synth. So basically, I'm setting up what's called frequency modulation from B. So that's just the notes being played. Now, what if I do FM synthesis? Now we're adding what's called harmonic content that wasn't even there before, and we're adding multiple notes. I'll quickly show you guys a couple things because I don't want to make this so geeky that we lose people. Now what happens when I detune it and I make it super screechy? Like, what note are we playing at this point? Now there is tonality there, but when we start detuning and becoming more as a, into a sine wave type of pad, like this type of sound, like what note are we really playing? It's a drone sound at that point. Okay, so let me kind of illustrate my next point. So that's when people teach you note values as opposed to what it sounds like, because the sound overrides the note. And let me show you exactly this scientifically real quick. Let's switch this to a sine wave. Okay. Let's edit this. So when you get deeper into sound design and music theory, you'll realize you have things called harmonics. I'm not going to bore you to tears about harmonics right now, but right now, the sine wave basically has a fundamental frequency. Now, when I start adding harmonics, we're adding more notes to the sound. So we're playing more than one note. So we're combining notes here. Whole different note, whole different note. That's a dissonant note. Okay, so now we have more of a realistic sound. But it's more than that one note. That was my main point. Now we're getting into sound design. What I'm trying to illustrate to you guys who are beginners is just that one note is not one note. I just played the same notes. They sound way different than if I played it just as a sine wave. Okay, so that's called the harmonic series. We're going deeper into music theory with that. The way we play the chord overrides the chord type. And that's my last lesson for you guys, is just to understand chord voicing. Again, here's the D minor 7th. We can play it this way, which is a kind of bland and boring. It has the same vibe, but what if we revoice this to now raise that third, add another bass? Now it has more of that R&B life to it. Simple as that. So that's called chord voicing. I teach that at busyworksbeats.com/music theory magic. I'll leave all the music theory links below. I want to thank you guys for watching, but those are my problems that I've found with traditional music theory. All right, guys, subscribe if you're new, share with a friend. Peace.